let's be real. Slow application reviews kill momentum, and students shouldn't have to wait weeks for a decision. That's why Element 451's admissions agents are game changers for teams like yours. They can review hundreds of applications in under a minute, flag fraud, and keep students moving forward. See them in action in a live Zoom demo on March 26th. Spots are limited, so grab your seat now at enrollify.org/boltagents. That's BOLT agents.
We're not asking them to do everything all at once, but then over time, we are building that complete picture of each student's interests and their intent. So by the time they're really deep in that funnel, our goal is to have really rich insights to really personalize our outreach for them.
They don't know us. We don't know them. They're just making an estimate of what it is. So it's misleading to us. We said, it's just more form fatigue, like Kelsey was saying. Let's ask the things that are most important.
Welcome to The Application, a podcast focused on actionable takeaways to help you level up your marketing and enrollment management game. I'm your host, Dr. Allison Turcio, Assistant Vice President of Enrollment and Marketing at Siena College. Join me every Tuesday for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing and enrollment management. The Application is part of the Enrollify network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal faves linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Want to know how to gather data on prospective students and use it to create authentic, engaging, and personalized communication that actually drives applications and enrollments? Joining me are Kelsey Smith and James Cox from Purdue University's Mitch Daniels School of Business. They've developed a strategic approach to progressive profiling, collecting student data over time instead of all at once to create more meaningful connections and boost engagement. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Allison. Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Before we dive in, let's start with a fun question, because I think it's really interesting because I have two kids at home to try to describe the work that I do. So if you had to tell a 5-year-old what you do for work, how would you explain it? What would you say?
I would say I email people in very fun ways. Emails that they want to open.
Fun. Not a lot of people associate fun with email, Kelsey. I love that you've put those two things together, and we're gonna talk about why you think those two go together. What about you, James?
I am a Salesforce administrator, so I run our CRM, and I used to say 10 years ago that I basically run a glorified Rolodex, but nobody knows what a Rolodex is anymore, especially not a 5-year-old.
That's like asking them to pick up a regular phone. So yeah, they wouldn't understand.
The cord phone.
But we've come a long way, and you guys have very modern, I think, approach to thinking about email and CRM. So let's get into it. Let's start with the basics. For those who are unfamiliar, what is progressive profiling and why might it be valuable for us?
Progressive profiling is really just a strategic way to collect information about your prospective students. It's really the concept of over time instead of everything all at once. So instead of bombarding someone with a really long form up front, answering all of the questions about yourself at the same time, we try to capture just those basic details first. So first name, last name, email, program of interest, their interest level. And then gradually, as they start to engage with us over time throughout their journey, then we start getting into those more in-depth questions and really building out that profile for that person. And that's really valuable in student recruitment because it reduces that form fatigue. We're not asking them to do everything all at once, but then over time, we are building that complete picture of each student's interests and their intent. So by the time they're really deep in that funnel, our goal is to have really rich insights to really personalize our outreach for them.
You're getting at a core issue, I think, in higher ed. We always joke about the number of questions that we're asking on a request for information form when you go to a college website. So you're getting at a really big pain point. And I think what we struggle with is this balance between what do I need to know as an institution, truly, honestly, if you talk to the data people, to create a profile on the student, create a student record in Banner or whatever the source of record might be at your institution, system of record might be, with what the student actually wants to tell us. I mean, when I go to any website and it's asking certain questions, like if they're asking for my phone number, I'm like back, because I don't need more spam texts like the toll road ones that we're all getting these days. It almost tricked my husband the other day. You haven't paid your tolls, and he's, oh, thank goodness the Easy Pass is under my name. So he came and asked me if this is real. I'm like, why would you even be getting it? The Easy Pass is in my name. Of course it's not real. So we don't need more of that. And so asking, finding those right questions to ask seems like a really good solution to that. What kind of data points are you finding to be most valuable as you collect over time?
Data points that are really important to us. I think we found two sides. One, there's data points that are important to us at certain points in the process. Then there's also data points that aren't important to us that we wanted to collect up front. So an example of that is like desired start term. So I think that's like a number one that you might think about whenever you're trying to really talk to a prospective student and understand more about them. But we realized whenever you're just filling out that initial RFI, that request for information from our website or some other source, the desired start term is really only going to matter to us once you're vetted and once it actually does look like you are going to be a good fit, we are going to be a good fit for you. The other thing too is it's usually incorrect. We found whenever you gather that information right off the bat, they don't know us, we don't know them. They're just making an estimate of what it is. So it's misleading to us. We said, it's just more form fatigue, like Kelsey was saying. Let's ask the things that are most important. So on our initial forms, Kelsey hit most of what the important ones are. First name, last name, email. We do ask for a phone number. And then
I think that one's optional, though.
I think our phone number is optional right now.
Which I think is important, too.
It is.
You don't have to give it.
Yes, exactly. It shouldn't be an impediment to you. We do have one that's not optional, which is where are you? So if you're in the US, what's your zip code?
Yeah.
If you're somewhere that's international. And the reason for that is we found as we've gathered data over time that different students have different needs and generally have different questions. So understanding a bit of where people are coming from can be really helpful for us in delivering good service to them and taking care of them. So going into what we ask a little bit later, there are things that we want to follow up with. So we also request program of interest on the front end, but later we talk more about career stats. In the Daniel School of Business, we deal with a lot of graduate students as well. So understanding where are you in your career? What are your career goals? We also ask some special audience questions. So it's really great to know if someone who's interested in Daniel's or a Daniel's program is former military. If we're able to get someone synced up with someone who's a student who was in the military, that helps you to get a good perspective of whether your interests are going to get taken care of and whether you'll be looked after. And then another one that's important to us is the last one I'll mention is interest in competing institutions. Right off the bat, it might seem a little bit like, oh, well, is that a really aggressive way to approach things? But the truth is if they've already been interested in other institutions, that tells us a lot of what their values are and what their interests are. And of course, just like every organization, you're going to be familiar with the other institutions that are out there, and we can help go over the pros and cons. Sometimes that means that Daniel's going to be a great fit. Sometimes it means that another institution is going to be a great fit. We really want what is best for the student to come out in the wash. So understanding a bit about who else is in the landscape, and then understanding if people are interested in that, what Daniel's offers relative to those can be really helpful.
I can see how you can infer what's valuable to that student by the other schools that they're interested in. I can totally see that. I'm actually trying to picture how this looks and works. I know what an RFI form looks like. We all know what one of those looks like when you go on the website. But what does it look like when you're at the second phase, the third phase, the fourth phase, and you're collecting this additional information? What does that look like from the user perspective? How are they giving you that additional information?
Yeah. So like James mentioned, it is kind of it's in multiple ways, which I think is important too, to not feel like it's all coming at once or all one way. So they have that initial RFI form, and then throughout their journey, they're in multiple different journeys based on that initial form. We do have other forms. We have a progressive profile form that has some additional questions. Again, that one's a pretty short form, so it's not anything super long, but it is something that they're getting once we've started communicating with them, once we've started giving them some really personalized communications based on their first interaction with us. So we start personalizing.
Call to action? Is it a call to action?
It's a call to action.
In one of the emails, Kelsey? Okay.
Yeah. And it's a call to action in our recruitment journey. So it is coming from the recruiter who's also reaching out to them and speaking to them. And James can talk a little bit about how they kind of collect it on their side as well.
We have a number of different ways that we like to collect this info once the recruiters are involved. Oftentimes it's going to be through calls. Through back and forth in emails, that's a great way to gather info as well, but it's just more freeform. So whenever our recruiters do have a call with someone who's a prospect, it's a key step whenever they first start to have a call and establish that. Build rapport is a big piece. But then once you have that call, we have scripts that are built into our CRM. So we use Salesforce, and it just makes it really easy. Whenever you're on the call, it has a list of talking points. Hey, if you haven't chatted about this, remember, this is something that's important for us for the upcoming phases. We've actually recently relaunched this functionality, and we have different call scripts for different places along prospective students' journey that we have. So in the beginning, you're asking more broad questions. Later on, you can circle back on things that have come up before and make sure that they're okay, or you can send reminders about other things that are happening because we're all subject to the seasonality of our role. Seasonality plays a huge part in higher ed. So we like to keep that in mind as well.
The next era of higher ed is here. AI that's both scalable and deeply human. At the 2025 Engage Summit, learn how to use agentic AI to personalize outreach, engage proactively, and free time for what matters most. This Don't Miss event is happening June 24th and 25th in Charlotte. Enrollify listeners get $50 off with code Enrollify50. Don't wait. Register at engage.element451.com. So what I'm hearing is it's a combination of perhaps additional form fields that a prospective student will fill out with intelligence that's being gathered by the recruiter via email or by phone. And all of this goes into a student's profile and then informs the next communications that the student's going to get in a really, really customized way.
Exactly.
Yeah, because the data, it's so great that we're gathering this data. It's like, but alone, it doesn't create engagement. Talk to me about how you're combining the data with the technology, with the automation, or even AI to make the data actionable and make it something that a student wants to receive and engage with.
One of the big things that I'll really harp on, I'm a champion for, is clean data. Having really strong data is important. It's a virtue. One of the ways that we leverage technology to make sure we're getting good data are those things like call scripts. Or we also have a form that will come up whenever a recruiter is on a call, and they can just type all the fields that are relevant to that moment into this form. If they have other things they need to fill out, they can take notes and fill them in later. But we really wanted to make it easy for them to jot down a quick note, to ask a question and save it so that there's not all these extra steps, not all this extra processing that has to happen there. And then from that moment on, really the data that we're gathering has a lot to do with what strategy the recruiters can take towards discussing next steps, or maybe identifying needs or identifying barriers that we might be able to help them overcome, with getting a letter of recommendation or something else. But then we also use that with our marketing as well, and with our emails as well. So Kelsey, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the way that our emails and our communications change as we gather more data.
So in our email strategy, we really leverage dynamic content to personalize our emails based on those specific data points to ensure that our recipients are receiving the most relevant information based on their interests and those data points that we know about them already. So we really try to take what we know from the very beginning and really personalize that as much as we can and then get even more personalized as we go. So once we determine those data points that we're using, we create that content for those different, scenarios. Our automated journeys in Marketing Cloud really do the rest. So they seamlessly deliver those messages to individuals as they enter the workflow. And it's really built into our workflow from beginning to end. So as we get more information, their communications naturally get more personalized.
Kelsey, this to me sounds like a huge lift on the content side when you're describing. I mean, it's so many layers because you have so many data points and then so many combinations, right? That can be happening. And then I think even about the example you were sharing earlier, James, about how you find out what other colleges they're interested in. So when you get down to that stream, I'm picturing, okay, maybe we're talking about value of the degree, right? That's sort of the main topic. And you know all of these things, but you would talk about the value differently to a student who it's Purdue versus school A versus another student who it's Purdue versus school B, right? Like, because you would have a different angle on that. So how do you grapple with that? I think you're serving yourselves up so many opportunities for really personalized communication. How do you actually work through that potential, I guess, and make it happen?
Honestly, it's really about starting small and not trying to do it all at once. Because like if you try to start all at once and you picture all those versions of the email, you picture all of the different versions of communication, that's a lot to start with. And that's really overwhelming. But really starting small. And I think, we did this really well with our initial RFI form with interest level. So we started with interest level and they have 4 different options, but we communicate to them differently based on what they're telling us where they're at when they're coming in. So the 4 options are, I want to talk with someone, just exploring, looking for more information, and ready to apply. So we're going to talk with someone a lot different who's ready to apply. They're coming in, they know they're going to apply, than someone who's just exploring. They're just getting some information. So they're coming into that first initial journey and they're getting really similar information. It's just presented in different ways to get them to take the action that's best for them. Because that next step for someone might be different. I want to talk with someone. Their next step might be talking to a recruiter. Someone who's ready to apply, their next step is probably starting their application. But we don't want to communicate to them in the same ways if they're at different points in their journey.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the other challenge that comes to mind is how do you do this personal communicating without coming across as too creepy, which I want to get to next. But I just want to take a minute to say thank you to our listeners and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast and my newsletter at AllisonTurcio.com so you don't miss out on the type of amazing and actionable advice that we're getting from Kelsey and James right now. So let's go to that creepy / personal line. We know that there's a fine line between helpful and invasive, right? And we've got to find that balance. So how do you ensure that the personalization feels really natural and it doesn't feel like that sort of big brother watching moment?
So we don't want students to feel like we're watching their every move, but we do want them to feel like we're listening.
Yes.
So I think framing that personalization almost as a service is a good way to do that. So instead of saying, we saw you clicked on X, we say, we saw you expressed interest in this. Here's something you might find useful. So I think it's a subtle shift, but I think it makes that personalization feel more helpful rather than creepy or we're watching everything that you do. But I also think it's important on the spacing out of your data collection as well. So it's almost like a more natural progression of their journey. They're providing more details as they get more comfortable with us, as they know us a little bit more. It's a more natural way of getting it rather than feeling so forced and like we're trying to know everything about you.
Well, I like how you're working in the phone call piece too, because what you're describing on the email and I'm guessing text message side feels like natural follow-up to the phone call conversation that they had with the recruiter. Is that right? Like it's continuing this personal relationship that got built on the phone, but now it's kind of just moved to a different medium. So maybe that makes it feel less creepy because I actually know you. actually talked to you.
Another thing that I'll mention too, once we get into the deep into the recruitment side of things, we do have a really great team of recruiters here at Daniel, and we lean on them. They're great at what they do. They're really great at building relationship. They're really great at communicating warmly. And so being able to give them a chance to customize responses and communication is something that's big for us as well, not to stifle them or not to put them in too much of a box. So while we do have call scripts, there's no requirement for them to cover everything that's on the call script. They get a chance to express discretion. Same thing with emails. We, of course, use email templates that our recruiters will use to send manual emails, but it's really just a guideline and they all are able to customize those things. And same thing with SMS messages. We really want our recruiters to be able to use their discretion because that's what they're excellent at without bogging them down too much with manual steps. But it is one thing that we really pride ourselves on here at Daniels is keeping that personal approach with prospective students as they move through the process.
I love that. I think that's a challenge a lot of people have, right? What is the automated stuff and is it stepping on the personal stuff? And how does all of that kind of work together to have one seamless experience for the student on their end? Can you share an example of a campaign or communication strategy where you've used this profiling and then you've had improvements to the end results? Because I'm always curious about what was the uptick in engagement or the uptick in applications or enrollment, whatever it might be. What are you seeing? Because you're doing a lot of great work here. I have to imagine you're seeing results on the other end.
We see a lot of results with our initial segmentation, like I mentioned before, about the interest level and really diving in to that segmentation and communicating to them where they are in their journey. And then on top of that, we do also split communication by what type of program as well. So if it's a in-residence program, if you're an online student, and if you're international, we're communicating to you different ways based on that information. So an online program, we're going to be giving different information. In residence programs, we might be having videos on the campus, information like that. Your online student isn't going to necessarily need that information. And if you're international, we're providing those international specific application information that you might need. But instead of giving that to everybody, you're getting a very personalized experience based on that. And we've seen a lot of engagement and moving through that step into the starting their application and starting that earlier in their journey because we are communicating to them kind of where they are. And we're trying to get them to take their next step based on where they are. And we really want to do so much more with all that we're getting. We don't have everything in place now. Like we're starting where we are and really trying to incorporate this as we go. So if we know funding is a concern, if we know their barriers to application, their career goals, what are their motivations, we really want to start looping this into these journeys as well to get even more engagement and get them to kind of take their next step.
You'll do it. I think AI will help you.
Yeah.
Truly, because you have this really strong base. You have really strong content pieces from what you're describing that you're putting together, video here, this. And then as you label a student, for instance, a career-minded student or one's a cost-conscious student, you can see how you can take the base of what you've created and AI actually might be able to help you, okay, now make this, which is, by the way, your original content written by you or your team. And how do I make this sound relevant, more relevant to this type of student, right? The cost-conscious student, what modifications you would make to it, which leads me to my final question, actually. For those who are interested in getting started with progressive profiling, where do they begin? What's your advice?
I'll reiterate some things that Kelsey said, actually. So she had mentioned earlier, start small, but start right now. I think that's the best thing to do is go ahead and pick a few data points that you really want to focus in on and pick a few forms that you want to analyze and say, how long is this? Is this too long? And like you mentioned before, AI can be a really helpful tool in cutting out some of this guesswork that's there and give you some ideas of ways to improve things. Our boss, who's a great coach, Dan Gaines, he's actually on an AI exploration council here at Purdue. And so we're trying to integrate AI even more in what we do. Taking a form and feeding it into ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, whichever you have access to, and saying, tell me how to make this more efficient, or tell me what I can cut out. Tell me how I can break these up over time So get started, start small, start now. The other big thing I'll say too is try to really implement templates and automation so that you can have consistent data. That's something that as you grow, you really don't want to have to go back and revamp your data if you can help it. It's just part of the way that things work. But trying to start with the end in mind, trying to understand what you're going to use this data for, where does it come in the process? The other thing that I would say is develop a really good relationship with your stakeholders. Talk to your marketing team, talk to your recruiters, talk to your admissions team, and find out a really good understanding of the process. Find out some of the challenges that they come up with, find out some of the things that they have found are really effective, and try and build that into your process and spread it out throughout all those steps. I think if you start with those things, you're going to be on a route to developing a really, really good progressive profiling system that's going to serve you for years and years as you work. But yeah.
For sure, it should reveal those first questions that are going to be important to your team and to your audience, right? When we're talking about starting somewhere. Kelsey, bring us home.
Yeah, all great tips. The one thing I will add is really involve your recruitment team early. They have the best insights into what students care about. So their input is really invaluable into how you start and how you start to shape your personalization strategy. We work very closely with them, and their cadence of how they interact with students, I take that very heavily into consideration in how I do things on the automated marketing side. We're not overlapping. We're not communicating to people on the same day. It's very natural, but I wouldn't be able to do that without them. I wouldn't be able to know what they're doing and how to incorporate what I do as well. So really involving them early, I think, is key to really building that communication and personalization strategy that works for you.
All right, everyone. So talk to your recruiting team, work with your stakeholders, and start simple, because truly the opportunities with this are endless, right? So that might feel overwhelming to people, but just start from somewhere, start with those smaller segments, and then you can grow. Kelsey and James, thanks so much for sharing your insights today.
Yes, thanks
for
having
Allison.
us.
To our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe and leave a review. And if you're experimenting with progressive profiling at your institution, we'd love to hear about it. Reach out on LinkedIn or through the show notes. Until next time, keep innovating in enrollment marketing. The application is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed tech shows that are jam-packed stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. And they feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Day Kibbles, Jeremy Tiers, and so many other of your favorite higher ed leaders. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.